Welcome back to another edition of the Slipstream Podcast and our final 2023 team preview episode where we're getting you up to speed for the 2023 season, which is just days away and starts this weekend. Hopping into the Slipstream tonight is myself, Brady, as well as Austin Coltrickle Jr. Matt is out tonight, and honestly, I'm not sure if this is some kind of silent protest against Christian Horner, but I digress. For this final episode, we will dive into the prospects of the reigning world champion Red Bull Racing, who finally knocked Mercedes off their 8-year title run in dominating fashion to win the 2022 Constructors title, as well as a historical performance by Max Verstappen for his second World Drivers' Championship. So Sten, our resident Red Bull fanboy, can Red Bull repeat the dominance of 2022 and run away from the pack again in 2023?
So it's funny, we were chatting a little bit before we hit record. We hit record just up and whichever, transparency. This is our first podcast since testing. We recorded a lot of them over the last 3 weeks before even liveries were released. And if you've been listening thus far through all of the constructors, there's been different bias and different opinions on kind of who's going to be that front running car. And I have kind of been quietly idling, thinking that Red Bull still might have it. Spoiler alert, at least in preseason testing, which doesn't mean everything, but they look really, really good. I think Drivers' Championship could be on the table still. I think Constructors might be, but I think that's kind of where it really just depends on if Mercedes even came out with a new kind of update today on Tuesday to fix some of the preseason testings before Bahrain. So it'll be interesting, but I'm excited. I love, opening season, opening week of the race season.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look to last year, Red Bull won 17 of 22 races. They absolutely dominated. And that's with a double DNF in Bahrain this time last year, right? And I think Max DNF'd in race 3 also. So 2 of the first 3 races, he DNF'd and destroyed everybody. He won the title by 205 points, even with those double DNFs early in the season. So Cole, what's it going to take from a Ferrari or Mercedes or Aston or whomever to even compete with Red Bull in 2023?
So my thought is, preseason, we thought that Red Bull was going to fall off a little bit. We kind of assumed with the cause cap penalties and some down and wind tunnel time that maybe the other teams would catch up, but it kind of looks like Max is going to run away with it again. So I don't know if Ferrari or Mercedes is going to have enough to catch up. I sure hope that they do. But at the current stage, ending preseason, getting ready to come into Bahrain this week, it looks like Red Bull is a clear-cut favorite to run away again.
Yeah, we can table our predictions for now. I mean, it's interesting. So, Stan, I know you talked about this a little bit last season, or at least we're looking to this season when we talked about what happened with the cost cap last year. And we don't need to rehash the fact that Red Bull cheated. I'm kidding. But look, they finished first. They dominated. They won the World Championship last year, which in and of itself comes with less wind tunnel time, right? So that plus the penalty for the cost cap means they at least have, I guess what you could argue is a substantial reduction in wind tunnel time. So is that something that we might not see right now, and maybe as the season progresses, the other teams can catch up? What do you think?
I think it's probably a compounding thing, right? We talked about it. I think I referenced it when we talked about Williams, however long ago, where the team started 100% threshold. The way that you finish in the constructors is how it's either removed or added to your total time. And I think it started, and I don't have the chart in front of me, but it started at winners get 80% total bandwidth. The last place gets 120. And I think it tweaks maybe a percentage or half a percentage or something. So if you look at, again, the time at Red Bull before a penalty at 80% available threshold versus Williams, who was at 120%. It's a 50% change in wind tunnel time. So you're to get long answer is it's going to take a little bit of time, but as soon as that pendulum swings on the lower midfield and the backfield, it is going to have a lasting effect.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of where I'm thinking, right? I mean, I think if you look at just the end of the season was what, less than 4 months ago. So over the winter, is it reasonable to expect one of these other teams to just figure it out at least to the level to surpass Red Bull? Doesn't seem realistic to me. It sounds like the rumors are Aston Martin has figured it out more than anyone else, at least from the midfield, and maybe could potentially contend with the top three. I mean, we'll see. Mercedes definitely has some changes, even though they kept the no side pod concept. They've definitely come with sort of a different looking vehicle. I think if anyone can figure it out, it might be them. I mean, we saw last year that Ferrari had a really good car, and we talked about this on our Ferrari preview that, I think at least performance-wise, they were closer to Red Bull than anybody else. They just had some issues that got in their own way. But what's interesting to me, and again, Sten, you might know the technical elements of this more than me, but these new versions starting last year, the 2022 and now this current generation of Formula One vehicle is very much a ground effect vehicle. So basically it sucks the car to the ground. And so we saw almost every team last year suffer from porpoising, and Red Bull probably suffered the least, which makes you think that they figured it out better than anyone else. So they already have that advantage from last year going into this year. I know they changed the rules a bit, but after preseason testing, it doesn't seem like they've lost anything, even with that rule change.
Yeah, I think there was a reference. I want to say that they started talking about kind of the ground stays, right? The poles that stick off the side pod to connect to the floor. They talked about it in Canada, right? And Mercedes had already rolled into Canada practice with a floor that had an extra piece, which is like, we just announced that. How did you already have one ready? So there was conspiracy that they were already in the know of that. But regardless, I think it was fully launched in maybe Silverstone, and we didn't really see a great result. Max got some floor damage. Clearly that car is really sensitive with some underbody damage because he was kind of like midfield racing. I think he was like racing Mick or something for 9th or 7th towards the end of the race. But then, you have the summer break, they come back, and the first race back from summer break, if my memory serves me correct, was Belgium, which people were supposed to catch up. Belgium was supposed to be a more even playing field. And that was the most dominant race of the year, of the last handful of years. I don't know where it would compete all time, but it was an amazing race to watch, at least from the output of a vehicle, and just being appreciative of that. But again, I think it's cool that, last year we saw such different vehicles on the grid. And I think it'll slowly kind of narrow that pointy end to get a little bit sharper. You have like Haas and Ferrari who are living in their world, and then you've got a lot of the other teams in the middle, and then you've got Mercedes on the far end. I think as the cars are kind of evening out the new pecking order, eventually you will start seeing very, very, very similar cars in the coming probably 2-3 years.
I remember that Spa weekend after summer break, we all thought, okay, here comes Mercedes. They're going to charge to the front. It just didn't happen. And Red Bull continued to improve and get better and run away. So, Cole, I'm curious. Well, this is sort of an open-ended question for everybody, and then I'll come to you, Cole. Does anyone here not think Max Verstappen is the best driver in Formula One right now?
No. I feel like that's not even a question at this point.
Yeah. I mean, to me, if you put him in equal equipment, I guess I'd love to see that battle with Lewis again. But yeah, he's got to be the best driver in Formula One right now. I mean, even his previous peers like Albon are like, I understand why Red Bull created the car for Max because he might be the greatest driver of all time. So Cole, we know what Max is, right? I mean, it feels like it's definitely his title to lose in 2023. But what do you make of Checo? Do you see this as being his last year in 2023 with Red Bull? Do you think he can actually contend? What do you think?
So I do think it's probably his last full season in this team. I think it is his last year under contract as well. I mean, Red Bull is perform or lose that seat. I mean, that's kind of been the writing on the wall, and Checo's done the best trying to keep up with Max. Obviously, no one can do that. So that really the second seat at Red Bull, it's impossible to fill. Those shoes are, it's like Valtteri in Mercedes, right? Those are just impossible shoes to fill with having a teammate when the car is suited for you and they're as consistent as they are. So I think Checo is a great driver. I would not say he's outstanding. He's very clearly the number two. I wouldn't be surprised if Danny Rick got a couple looks, maybe potentially to get him in just to show face. I'm not really sure if that's the best move for Red Bull, but I mean, Danny Rick, obviously he carries a huge following in the sport, but there are a lot of hungry people knocking on Checo's door for that seat. So Checo knows it's time. If you do not perform, that seat will not be yours for long. They will replace you in 2 races.
So I'm gonna just follow up with that though. Like, does Red Bull want a driver that is going to be competing against Max, or do they want a driver who can get second to constructors or in the drivers, help them secure, and be in that Bottas role and maybe win a race here or there, but not really, challenge the machine?
Yeah, I mean, you already answered about the way I was going to answer it. I mean, look, it looks like Checo's going to play the Bottas role to Lewis for those 5 titles, right? I mean, Lewis was clearly the number one. He was clearly the best driver in the best car. And all Bottas really had to do was finish the race, and he was in good enough. I mean, this isn't to take anything away from Valtteri. He's obviously a great driver. But all he really had to do was finish the race during those 5 years. He'd finish in the top 5 on the podium. I mean, what was it? Hamverbot? How many times did that happen, right? So yeah, I mean, look, to me, that's Checo's role. Would I love to see him compete with Max or whoever is going to win the championship? Absolutely. I like Checo. Do I think he's at that level? I don't. I mean, if I'm going to rank Checo, 1 to 10 in the drivers, it's probably, I don't know, 6th or 7th. I mean, I'm going to go, obviously, Max, Lewis, George, Lando, Charles. So he's in that, to me, like, maybe miss one, like Carlos, Fernando, that range, right? Which is great, right? It's phenomenal, but he's not the talent of Max.
I agree. And I would agree that changing that role, I mean, he's obviously suited that role. He's played defense when he needs to. He's done everything that Red Bull has asked of him. It's just not questioning Max and not questioning the team decisions is really just like Valtteri had to learn, right? It's just kind of, that's your place in the team. If you want to get second place in the World Championship, you have that potential for a couple seasons if you can fill that role. But if not, they will fill it with somebody else. I would love to see Nick or a Yuki or someone else come up into that role, but because Checo he's not young, right? So he's only got a couple years left in him regardless. And it won't be Danny Rick to fill the seat. So they will be looking for whoever's next. Again, we mentioned it before. Seeing Nick and Max on a team would be pretty fun. We'll see what Nick does, but that could be pretty fun, especially for the Netherlands.
I don't see Yuki at AlphaTauri for more than another 2 years. I think the aim is to put De Vries in that seat before the end of next season, probably.
Yeah, not to get up on a tangent. There was also rumor a couple days ago that AlphaTauri was potentially for sale. Of just selling that team to maybe make room for the Andretti or the whoever other team would be. So that just a rumor that Tauri could be potentially sold in the next season or two, and Red Bull could really just throw all their eggs in one basket. Not that they're not already doing that, but really focus on the Red Bull team.
Yeah, the Nick De Vries thing's interesting. I mean, we'll see how he does this year. I mean, if he's the best rookie on the track, But the Checo thing, to me, is still so interesting, right? I mean, we definitely felt like we had the moment in Brazil that was like, know your role and shut your damn mouth, if anyone's a rock fan, right? When Max was like, no, and don't ask me again, I'm not going to give up the place. I mean, he was third in the Drivers' Championship by 3 points over Charles. So he obviously had a great year. And if he can do that again this year and at least flirt with second again. If Checo is second in the Drivers' Championship again this year, they have to renew his contract. I mean, how could you not?
I agree.
Right?
But again, Checo was, 225 points behind Max in equal equipment.
It was 149. But
yeah,
yes.
but what more can you ask at that point? You know what I mean? Even if he's that far behind, if he's still second in the Drivers' Championship, what does it matter how far he is behind Max? Max is going to win regardless. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's a finite number of points too, right? If Max wins every race with fastest lap, that's 26. So the best Checo can do is 8 less points per race, and you multiply that by 22, 23. I mean, that's 190, 200 points. So, yeah, I mean, I agree, Cole. I think all if Checo does what he did last year, you have to renew him. I don't see why you wouldn't, or at least he would definitely have an argument to stay in the sport, to stay in that seat. So, I mean, we'll see. I think we all liked Checo. It was fun to see him win in Monza. It was fun to see him win in Monaco last year. I think a lot of us. I said this about Charles. I don't know anyone who's not a Checo fan. Maybe Max is the only one that's
Max's
a
mom.
Checo fan, but yeah, Max's mom. That's right.
Yeah. Checo won Singapore this year, which was kind of like the weird win where you qualified first, you won the race. He won Monaco, so he was the only person to win the two. Actually, and he didn't win Baku.
No,
he won
right.
Baku.
Yeah, Baku was 2 years ago when Lewis had the break
2 years ago.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it was Singapore and Monaco.
But he does well, but he's not going to challenge week in and week out. He will put down fast laps. He can help support, but I don't think there's any reason, intention, purpose for him to try to challenge Max.
Well, and he can't. But more
Fair.
I want to change subjects just a little bit, staying in Red Bull, but we got a little hate on the interwebs for ranking the Red Bull livery an F. And I'm going to just clarify for everyone. It's not that we don't like the Red Bull livery. We think that it's outstanding. But you can't tease us with a blank livery slate and then do an hour launch video and launch the same fucking car you've had for 8 seasons. Come on. It's a great car, right? It's beautiful. It's iconic. We get it. I'm in. But with the graphic designer team that you have at Red Bull, that's the best we can come up with, is the same damn thing every season. Just disappointed.
Well, I think the reason why, two things. One, the reason why their car is so fast is because they save money in creative. Two,
they spend in
spit it on
catering,
pickles
right?
and sandwiches.
Yeah. Two, aren't they the only team over the last year and this livery that isn't all carbon?
Yeah, I mean, look, I understand with people's opinions, why don't fix something that's not broken. I think, Cole, to your point, I mean, we all play, the F1 video game, right? So we like liveries. And it was awesome. What was it, Turkey 2 years ago when they had that white livery? That was badass, right? So, I think everyone's just craving to see something like that for longer than a weekend, right? It was very cool. We loved it. So, yes, we like the Red Bull car. We don't dislike it. It was just, we wanted to see them spice it up a little bit, or maybe surprise us.
Yeah, and by surprising us, what you did was you've now left it to the fans to design a car for the 3 American races, which, don't get me wrong, I appreciate, but that's what you're here to do, is to create a sweet livery for us to appreciate, and you failed.
Not when you're saving money in the budget. It's smart. I mean, crowdsourcing stuff that could have cost millions of dollars to design, brilliant.
And still go over the cost cap.
Well, I think the smartest move they did last year was to make Adrian Newey a consultant and not a full-time employee.
It's a good move.
Well, yeah, that makes me want to dovetail into just a question. This is a shout out to our boy Matt, who's not here tonight. He wanted to make sure that we talked about Christian. What's everyone's opinions on Christian? I'll give mine first, if it helps. I love the Drive to Survive Christian. I can't stand the non-Drive to Survive, the race weekend, week to week Christian. I don't know why. I mean, he said it in Drive to Survive. It's once you get to the top, there's a few more arrows that come your way, and so maybe that's just me, wanting to root for someone else to contend. And I'm not a Mercedes homer. I mean, I like Mercedes. I like all the teams. I'd love to see Ferrari win it. But so maybe that just comes with the territory. But it's just interesting, that sort of juxtaposition of the characters. Like, I really like Christian on Drive to Survive. I think he's great. But, you know, when it comes to the drama and the pettiness of Formula One weekends, I kind of don't like it.
Austin, what's your take on Christian? I'm very curious to hear what you think about him.
You know, he married Ginger Spice,
Yeah.
so I can't hate it as a family of gingers. I think it's pretty solid. You know, I think I may have mentioned it last year. Like, I think that Mercedes is still Sky Sports' like favorite child, and I think Red Bull is kind of the stepchild, so it's always put in a different light. So I think maybe, Brady, your point about Christian looking better on Netflix, maybe because it's not being edited by a bias entity. He can be cringy at times, for sure. I think all of us can. He may be a little bit more than other people, but he's also in the spotlight as much as anyone else right now because of their success. And, you know, it's interesting to see that he wasn't a successful racer and he became the, you know, team principal. I don't know if he's CEO, owner, or whatever it would be, but I think regardless, he's, as a boss, as a team boss, he has, was it 5 constructors championships now and 6 drivers championships. So he's doing a decent job.
That was almost a Freudian slip there with the 5, but I'll let you. But yeah, Cole, so I'm curious about your opinion, obviously, on this. Before you answer, I did think, if for those that have seen Drive to Survive, the moment, episode 4, where they're all in the room and Toto's talking about porpoising, how people are going to get injured, and Christian was like, change your fucking car. That was great. That was like the one part of Drive. I mean, the whole Drive to Survive, I love Christian. He was absolutely right on that, and I appreciated that.
Yeah, I think that's what so I have mixed feelings about Christian. I think he's good for the sport. I think he plays the role that Netflix needed him to play to stir the pot enough. He's super cringy. I can't stand listening to him in any live interviews. He's terrible. But he's a great team principal. He's, like Austin said, he's got multiple constructors. And he plays the villain role perfectly, and he does stand up, right? He barks at Toto, right? Not many other team principals stand up and say much to Toto about it. So I appreciate the back and forth and him not backing down. But no, man, he's a pompous prick. I wouldn't want to hang out with him, but I would absolutely drive his car.
Yeah, it's just, it's fascinating. I mean, all the characters that we have in Formula One. I know some people love, some people hate Drive to Survive, but just the difference in personalities between someone like a Gunther and Christian and Toto makes it great. So, so we can move on. I got 2 other really things for you guys. First, we'll do picks, and I know Stin, you mentioned this at the top. We do have the benefit of hindsight here with testing. This is the first podcast we've recorded after testing. I think I had Red Bull 3 in the Ferrari predictions. I wasn't confident about that. I mean, I'd love to see where they're all separated by like 3 points and it's super close and someone wins on the last weekend. I'm definitely going to change that Red Bull, I think, runs away with it again this year and Max runs away with the drivers. I hope that's not what happens. I'd love to see, and I mentioned this in the Ferrari and maybe even the Mercedes, I hope we get that at least top 6 driver battle, or at least top 3 and maybe 4 teams if the Aston rumors are real. But what do you guys think? Is this Red Bull's title to lose again? Max's title to lose again? Is it going to be close?
I mean, I think I said it earlier. I think that it's probably still Max's title. I think they may not win the constructors. I think that's kind of a hand toss. We'll see how everyone else goes. But if you look at the driver pairings at the top 3, you're more balanced in Mercedes. It's going to be a cannibalization of points, right? Ferrari strategy isn't going to pick and choose. Maybe that changes now with new leadership. I think Leclerc isn't. I don't know if the gap from Leclerc to Sainz is as large of the gap as Max to Checo, but I don't think that someone's going to challenge Max as it currently stands. But we'll see about the teams.
Yeah, Brady, I'm very much in your shoes. I kind of thought loosely that they would finish third, just hoping that maybe things would be a little tighter. Preseason obviously doesn't tell us everything we want to know, but they do look like clear-cut favorites. I guess my prediction now would be that Red Bull probably will win the drivers' championship, and I'm hoping it's a close constructors. But if it's anything like what preseason shows, it seems like the midfield will be Aston, Mercedes, and Ferrari, and Red Bull will be in a league of their own. So,
well, I was gonna ask. So, if you had to pick one, who is more likely to challenge Red Bull this season? Is it Ferrari or is it Mercedes?
my answer would be Mercedes. Only because I feel like they spent a lot of time last season trying to figure it out, and Ferrari spent a lot of time last season trying not to fuck it up. So I'm hoping that Mercedes is a little ahead of the game. But again, nothing would make me happier than like a four-way battle at the front. But if someone's going to challenge Red Bull, my assumption this year, it would be a Mercedes.
You know, I think so too, just given the history of Mercedes, right? But there's a part of me, I think, that has scar tissue with Mercedes for last year. We talked about it on almost every episode, that it was only a matter of time before Mercedes got it right and was the Mercedes that we saw for 8 years. And it just never happened. Now, they definitely were closer by the end of the season. I mean, we saw Brazil. They were the best car in Brazil. I mean, they had moments. But from what we saw in preseason testing, it still seems like they're behind. Or, truthfully, and Cole, I know you were hard on this last year, was we all thought going into this preseason, like this time a year ago, thought Mercedes was sandbagging, and they weren't. But the porpoising was a major problem. So we know that they figured out porpoising. That was pretty clear in preseason testing. So maybe they are sandbagging. There's a part of me wants to believe that they're sandbagging, and this time in 4 days, whenever this released, after qualifying, we're like, well, shit, Mercedes won too, just like the old days. But I still think Ferrari's the better car right now than Mercedes. Are they the better team than Mercedes? I don't think so. Stin, to your point with the driver pairing, but it might be the better car, at least to begin the season. So I wouldn't be shocked if, take away the double DNF from Red Bull last year, that the top three are still Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes for at least the first, say, 6 weeks. And then I could see it being sort of a really good contest once the big upgrade from Mercedes comes in and we've got a few weeks under our belts. And then I hope, whatever, the last 16 races are unbelievable. And then we don't know who's going to win and we don't know which team is better.
I mean, Toto, I did hear Toto say in an interview that they obviously did not show their full hand at preseason. And I think most teams probably don't. So I think there is still a lot of unknowns. But if Red Bull even scratching the surface, I mean, they were, I think, almost a full second ahead. So, yeah, time will tell. But I think if it's going to be a team to challenge, it will be a Mercedes. I don't think Toto allows that team, especially with Lewis. He knows Lewis's time is limited, and the time to win a championship is this year or next year, and then Lewis is probably done. So the time is now for Mercedes.
All right. So any final words on anything sort of preseason predictions? This isn't Red Bull specific, but there's so much hype around Aston. It seems like they have to get fourth, right? With all the hype. That doesn't mean they will. Kind of seems like they have to. Will they contend with whoever's P3? Is it Mercedes, Ferrari? I don't know. I'd love to see it. I mean, we've all talked about, it's supposed to bunch the field, right? This would be a prime example of that actually happening if they really are as legit as everyone thinks that they are.
Yeah, I will say, because we didn't get to talk about it because the news didn't happen until recently, Lance Stroll broke both his fucking wrists the week before the season started. Like Fernando broke his jaw last year, I think, but I don't know. He missed 2 races. I don't remember how many races he missed, but come on, Lance. I don't know if they've officially announced who's replacing. Is he is officially racing for Bahrain?
Well,
I knew he did testing.
Maybe we'll know this by the time. Yeah. So they said if Lance isn't available, it'll be.
Because I mean, just for a second, I know we're talking Red Bull, but for a second, just imagine Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso on the same team for like 3 races. It would score so much better than I know y'all say that Lance is an underrated driver, but just to see those two on the track in green it'd be pretty special to see.
Lance is an underperforming driver on Saturdays, which makes his data, look like he's an overperforming Sunday driver.
But, Brady, I agree with you. It seems the hype seems to be that it is Aston's to lose at this point. Fernando looked fast. Even Felipe, who hadn't spent any time in a car, he put down some quick times as well. So I don't think that they're fast enough to challenge a Red Bull, but they are probably the team that everyone has eyes on to the start of the season.
I mean, look, the great news is we are moments away from the season starting, right? We've all been waiting for it. We don't have to really predict and daydream and all this stuff we're about to find out. But, if Aston Martin is, the sort of surprise of the season as it seems like in preseason, which means nothing, it might mean that we get a Alpine versus Aston Martin battle for 4th, which is obviously where Fernando left. Kind of bad blood. If you saw Drive to Survive, it's all about loyalty and all this stuff. So, getting the opportunity for, people like Fernando and Lance to rub elbows on the track for meaningful positions could be more dramatic than, who's winning the race. So sign me up.
And if you're a team like McLaren right now, I'm a McLaren fanboy, you've got to be a little worried. Bad preseason. A lot of the other teams look really fast and reliable. So a lot of question marks for McLaren.
Yeah. Look, like I said, we don't have to wait much longer to find out what's going to happen. It is a very long season, so what happens here in Bahrain could very well change by Abu Dhabi in November. But first, we really appreciate everyone tuning in to all of our preview episodes. So we hope that we got you up to speed on all of the changes going into the 2023 season, the new drivers, the driver changes, things to expect, even some predictions. Make sure you have your F1 TV account ready to go, your multi-viewer ready to go, and sign up for our Grid Rivals League. You should be able to find it by just searching Slipstream Podcast. We do it every year. We'd love to play against you, play with you. We'd love for you to embarrass a few of us, and we're all going to try to take Cole Trickle Jr. down from his, high horse of being the 2-time.
Won't happen. Champion. Good luck. Robbins Racing, baby. Let's get it.
So if you're like Cole, make sure you've got Aston Martin and Fernando in your lineup this weekend. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. We're super excited for the 2023 season to get underway this weekend in Bahrain.